This one hurts, Dolphins fans. Dalton Risner, one of the top offensive guard free agent targets for Miami and Chris Grier. He is off the board. He's re-signing with the Minnesota Vikings. Adam Schefter had the note earlier this morning, and a team that really needs a right guard to help fortify this offensive line and protect quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Well, there is one less good option out there. And before we dive into some other free agent targets on the offensive line that the Dolphins could sign, I want to know your one-word reaction to Risner signing with the Vikings, because I know a lot of y'all wanted to sign him to add to this roster. So did I. I preferred another option who is still out there, which we'll get to, but give me your one word down below. My one word, disappointing. Now, who's to say how high the interest was for Miami in Dalton Risner? It could have just been at least the buzz generated by fans wanting to add Dalton Risner. He's had 5 years of experience at left guard, but Miami needs a right guard, whereas why I think a different guy could be the play for Chris Grier. But when you look at this Dolphins offensive line, it just remains clear. And on a day-to-day basis, every time we talk about the Fins here on the channel, it becomes more and more evident that that needs to be absolutely addressed. You have two good offensive tackles in Austin Jackson and Teron Armstead, with some depth there as well with Kendall Lamb and Patrick Paul. Isaiah Wynn, Aaron Brewer at center and left guard, but Robert Jones, Jack Driscoll, Liam Eichenberg, Lester Cotton, those are the four guys fighting for that right guard spot, and it's still a massive need because that is the worst roster spot on the entire team. There's no debating that. You could talk about the need for another defensive tackle. You could talk about a need for a third safety, but when you look at a starting position on this Dolphins team, right guard is no doubt the worst one. And I get it, not all 22 starters that the Dolphins are going to throw out there are going to be perfect. But I would like to see an improvement because I just don't have the trust in Robert Jones for that right guard spot. I know a lot of us are intrigued to see what Jack Driscoll can bring to the table after coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles, but if they don't deem him good enough to start week one, well, maybe they do need to go out and sign someone. And the number one guy to me that you need to sign in free agency is Greg Van Roten. He is the top target for the Miami Dolphins. He's been the top target if you're asking me, and it's because he fits better with the squad. We talked about Risner, we talked about Van Roten. Well, Van Roten played right guard last year for Las Vegas and had one of his best years of his career. So I would love to see Miami and Chris Grier bring him in because I believe he could legitimately start on the Dolphins in week one. I mean, he was terrific in Vegas just a year ago. Only allowed 5 sacks. That's not great, but no penalties, and he put up good PFF numbers if you take their grading system to heart, having a 75.3 overall grade, a 77.4 pass blocking grade. That ranked in the top 10 in the interior offensive lineman rankings a year ago, according to Pro Football Focus. And I don't want to overreact here, but Van Roten is really the only guy that is still on the market, at least in the free agency pool. Trades are a different story, and maybe we can look at some trade targets on a future episode, but he is the only one that is still available on the free agent market that I believe could come into Miami and start right away. That's really the only one because the other 4 names that we're going to talk about on today's show are not great. But I'll say this, if the Dolphins sign an offensive line, whether it be Greg Van Roten or any other name, we will have you covered with a video. So make sure you're locked in with us here at Dolphins Today. I'm Nic Rohloff. We'll have you covered on everything you need. All right, the number 2 interior offensive lineman that I would like to target, if they go any guy on this group, is Phil Haynes. He played guard for the Seattle Seahawks last year in limited snaps, only played 437, and it wasn't the greatest in the world, if we're just going to be honest. PFF grades were 52, 59, 53, not the best, but he had 6 penalties and 5 sacks allowed. Not great, Jim. Not great at all. Like, that just kind of goes to show you that I believe he could be the second best free agent guard for Miami to sign, and that is his numbers. It just shows you how bare it is out there. If we're going to be honest, like, what else would you expect when we're talking about free agent targets on the offensive line late May, early June here? So that's why Greg Van Roten clearly feels like the number one priority to me if you are the Dolphins, especially with Dalton Risner coming off the board. So let me ask you this. We talked about the one-word reaction to Risner, but do the Dolphins need to sign a guard? If you believe they still do, type Y for yes. If you believe they're fine, type N for no. I don't know how you could type N for no. I get there could be other positions to go after, but guard is the top one if you're asking me. Third on my list, Nick Gates. And this one might be a little bit of a stretch because he actually did not play guard last year at all. He played center for the Washington Commanders a year ago. It was very up and down for Nick Gates, who began his career in New York for the New York Giants, but then transferred over to the Commanders. His grades aren't as terrible. 65.9 overall, 61.4 pass block, 5 sacks allowed. Feels like 5 sacks allowed is the magic number for all these guys, and 4 penalties. The good news is if you were to sign Nick Gates, he has tons of experience. And yes, it would be a new position for Gates, but I'm kind of under the belief at least that the interior offensive line positions can be switched and swapped around pretty easily. Center might be the hardest to pick up, so if you could go from center to guard, that would probably be easier in my opinion, but he was a starter for most of his time in New York and in Washington, so he would come over, probably the leader in the clubhouse to potentially get that starting right guard spot, leave Aaron Brewer at center. Nick Gates is an option I think we have to keep our eyes out for. Make sure you get started with the number one daily fantasy sports app on the market. That is Prize Picks. Join more than 5 million users that play Prize Picks on a daily basis, and it is so fun to play with different promotions and different specials. And with Prize Picks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less, yes, that's simple, on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. The NBA playoffs are here, NHL as well. I'm looking to Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals between the Mavericks and the Timberwolves. More than Luka Doncic, 3.5 triples, less than Karl-Anthony Towns, 19.5 points, and more than on Daniel Gafford, 15.5 points plus rebounds. 3-player entry to win 5 times my money. Make sure you join me at Prize Picks because when the finals roll around, it means more on Prize Picks, and so do the star players. You can get boosted payouts on select basketball stars that you won't find anywhere else. So get started today. Download the app and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Or you can go to the description and comments, click on that link, prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's move over to Trey Turner now, the offensive guard who has tons of experience as well. He is number 4 on my free agent targets list, and he would be a little bit higher if he played in 2023, and while he might not be available if he did. He missed the entire season with a torn quad, signed with the Saints late in free agency, and then 4 days after signing, he tore that quad. Little disappointing. Unfortunate event for Trey Turner, but he's had an excellent career because he has started all 9 years in his career. Last season would have been his 10th, but he obviously missed that year. He was a day 2 pick for the Carolina Panthers, and that's where he began his career. He was really good, and he's amassed a good PFF grade over his 9-year starting career. 64.5 overall, almost damn near 70 pass block, only allowing 22 sacks and being called for 43 penalties in 9 seasons. That will play. That's about 2 and change sacks allowed a year. That's solid, and only about 4 and change penalties called a season as well. Like, those are solid numbers. But the only question that remains is he enters what would be his trying to be 11th year since being drafted. Can he bounce back from injury? Like, he's in the plus side of 30. And he's coming off a torn quad. Is he going to be able to bounce back and play strong? He would be coming into this Dolphins room probably not as a guaranteed starter, but he could, as a decent veteran, lead that group heading into training camp. 5th and final name we'll talk about on today's episode, Connor Williams. And the reason why I have him at 5 is, well, he's obviously not going to be ready to go for week 1 of the NFL. But if you just talk about offensive linemen in general, he is clearly the best on this list. He was absolutely terrific for Miami over the last 2 seasons. Yes, he had his snapping problems as a center, but he was an excellent blocker. And there's no disputing that if you're asking me. Sure, the high snaps are frustrating at times, but he is a good blocker. And he has had experience playing offensive guard when he was with the Dallas Cowboys. And to me, is it worth taking the flyer on bringing him back? I think it is. And I actually could see the Miami Dolphins re-signing Connor Williams during training camp, a little bit before camp, because he is not going to be ready. He tore that ACL in the middle of last season. So he's not going to be ready to come back and play until at least 5+ weeks into this NFL regular season. Could you sign him in late August, early August, keep him on your roster, the PUP list, and then bring him back middle of the season, especially if that right guard position is still giving you issues? That's where you plug Connor Williams. Or, heck, if Aaron Brewer gets injured or something like that, you have Connor Williams, who has played center for you the past 2 seasons. If another team does not scoop him up before August comes around, I'd be all in on keeping him in Miami and re-signing him to like a 1-year deal or something like that. But would you re-sign Connor Williams to this Miami Dolphins roster? If you would, type S for sign. If you're all good and you want to go elsewhere, type your P for pass. All right, before we head out, listen, I asked who is going to comment the most on a video last week, and the winner, Mac Bones 6179 with 22 comments. A little round of applause for Mac. It was a competitive race, man. There was a couple people with over 20. There was someone with 21, 20, 19, but Mac Bones outlasted them all with 22. Shout out to you for winning last week's comment challenge. And make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because we're going to have you covered on everything surrounding the Fins on the channel leading up to training camp in August. So hit that sub button. I'll see you in the next video. Go Fins.